And a different start to Erie News Now tonight at 7 o'clock. Now, yesterday, we aired the Democratic candidates debate in the race to become the next mayor of the city of Erie. And tonight, we wanted to give the Republican candidate in the race a chance to also the same questions we asked the Democratic candidate.
So joining us now is Republican candidate in the race for the city of Erie mayor, Matthew. Thank you for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you. We want to give you the time. So we just want to start off with uncertainty regarding funding in the future, moving forward. How will you prioritize different projects and services throughout the city?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, there is going to be a lot of uncertainty, unless something changes. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty regarding funding in the future because the city population is declining so fast, and frankly, we're losing our tax base. I think right now with crime, which I think we'll probably get to, but, we have to certainly prioritize the Erie Police Department, which the mayor is in charge of, and which I work with regularly as a public defender, despite the adversarial relationship. We get along. I get along really well with all the city police officers. I think they'd say that as well. But ultimately, and I don't want to start too negative here, but right now, if nothing changes, the city of Erie, Pennsylvania, is a dead man walking. Since 1960, or 1965 rather, it's the mid-1960s when we last had a Republican mayor, the city has lost an average of 8,333 people, give or take, per decade. The most recent census, which I believe was also discussed during the Democratic debate, shows that the population decline isn't decreasing, it's speeding up. At that rate, in 30 years, we are not going to be the number 3 city in Pennsylvania, population-wise, as we once were. We're not going to be 4th, which is where we're at now, behind Allentown. We're not going to be 5th. We're not going to be 6th. We're not going to be 7th. We will be 8th. 8th. Okay. So, and at that point, you wouldn't even call us a city. It's really just a mid-sized town. And I think, and don't let me get too far ahead of you here, but, we see, I think really, 3 key reasons for that. Okay, first of all, as I already mentioned, is the crime. That has to be brought under control. And I think particularly the drug crime and the drug trafficking, which, brings some pretty hardened people in from other towns, from other cities. We get a lot coming in from Cleveland, a lot coming in from Detroit. I know that there's been a big movement to legalize marijuana, but I think what a lot of people don't realize, that's all laced with fentanyl now. We see this constantly in the reports that, that criminal defense attorneys and prosecutors get. There was a shooting of a 17-year-old, which I know you guys reported on. You did a very nice job, by the way. But there was a shooting of a 17-year-old. He died. That was 3 doors down from my house. So, my wife and children obviously, could have. Bullet goes a little bit astray. That's a very, very bad day. It's a bad day as it is, but it becomes a worse day when innocent, bystanders are hit. And then, you look at the schools. Every single young professional couple that I know that has children all want to move out of the city of Erie. I was just looking, and it's sad, I was just looking at U.S. News and World Report, and they rank colleges. Gannon, where I'm a graduate of, obviously does very well, but you look at, the local high schools, and I think, so you get about a 70% graduation rate out of Erie High, whereas out in the county, I think the lowest rated is technically Northeast, and they still do a great job because they've got an 89% graduation rate. Everybody else is above 90%, just to give some context. And the other thing is taxes, property taxes, things like that. One of the first things, I used to work as a law clerk for the judge here, and one of the first things, I walked on the job and I just bought a house, and I was talking to some of the other law clerks, and one of them said to me, well, no, you got to leave the city of Erie. You got to go out to Mill Creek or Harbor Creek or something where, and I said, wow, well, property taxes are way lower. Okay, I'm not a rich guy. I bought my house for $71,000, back in 2018. But anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead of you.
Let me ask you this. Was there one point, Matthew, a tipping point for you that you said, I'm going to run? What was it?
Yeah, I think the shooting didn't help. I admit this was something I hadn't really anticipated doing. There was a lady who had, who's active in Republican Party politics, who came to me and said, well, do you want to do this? And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, okay. A little bit scary. I'm, relatively, I'm in my 30s, relatively young guy, and as I said, I have a wife and kids, and there are other things that sometimes you want to focus on, but but, yeah, somebody had to step up, so.
That being said then, Matthew, what is the strategy like then? Because a lot of people are going to say, well, how does a Republican win in the city of Erie? How do you do it?
Yeah, there are ways. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, and I can't guarantee, that we will win. Obviously, you have to, ultimately it is the decision of the voters, and, they have to decide that they're going to take the city in a different direction. My wife and my family and I, as I said, were young professionals. My wife was the acting head of the Erie County Library System on 2 separate occasions, and was offered the top job by both Kathy Dahlkemper and Brent Davis, and ultimately made the decision to stay home with our kids. But we have a lot of people who are out walking the streets, flipping voter registration. Those people, to be clear for the Republicans out there, they do have to show up to vote. It's not, even if you're registered, this is an off year election, so a lot of it's going to be about turnout. But we saw in the last election, the presidential election, where the county had flipped back Republican, and that was because of voter registration efforts by people like Scott Pressler, who is, as you know, is very, very famous at this point for what he's done.
Matthew, one final question. We have about a minute and a half left. Your thoughts on blight and code enforcement in the city?
Well, if I talked that long. I think, I think, and I want to say one of you had mentioned West 12th Street to me before the interview started. Yeah, look, I drive that every single day on my way to work. It does have to be cleaned up, but the larger problem is not so much code enforcement, although that's huge. The larger issue overall comes down to getting those businesses back into the city, because we don't just want to bulldoze everything and say, okay, hey, we fixed the problem.
Well, fees are a big issue with people, as you talked about property taxes in the city of Erie.
Right.
Landlords say that taxes and fees are really holding them down. Where do you sort of draw the line on that?
Yeah, affordable housing is really crucial, and obviously, we want landlords, not slumlords. We want people who do obey, building codes, and who do treat their tenants well. But I'm not blaming them. They are facing very high fees and taxes, including, as I mentioned, property taxes, because that, they have to pay that, and then they have to pass that on to their tenants. But the other thing, and I do think this is worth mentioning, we also have to make it easier in the state of Pennsylvania. This wouldn't be entirely in my hands, although there are some things maybe the city could do. But we do have to make it easier for tenants that create really, really big problems to be evicted, because most people I know say, yeah, hey, there's a lot of money, or was once a lot of money to be made in property. But obviously our president, whether you like him or not, he made almost all his money in the property business. And that used to be a way for middle-class families to rise up. But when you're afraid that you're going to get a tenant who's a huge problem, who's destroying your property, and then it takes you a year to get that person out of there, and meanwhile they continue to be destructive, that's an issue.
Let's talk, Matthew, public safety. We do have a little more time left. Let's talk public safety. How do you intend to keep, essential services rolling along and a top priority?
Yeah. So, let's just first, if we can, we'll address the blizzard from last year. Obviously, the streets were very, very poorly plowed. And this wasn't just, I can't blame this all on the city. The weather was bad, legitimately was. But we had reports coming out that I heard that there were, just before we'd allowed some of our snow plow drivers to go on vacation a ways to the south, and, they called them up and they said, well, I'm hunting in a tree stand, sport hunting and everything, but, I'm hunting in a tree stand, I'm several beers in, I can't make it back up. So we have to, watch the weather on places like Erie News now, make sure that we're anticipating that. We have to keep the streets cleaned up. And I'm sorry, could you reiterate the rest of your question? I think I went off topic just a little bit.
Just how do you keep the essential services a priority? What are you going to do to make sure you're at the top of the list?
Exactly. And so I think, we have a lot of great, festivals and parades and everything in the city of Erie, but when we're out seeking grant money, it can't just be, well, hey, let's bring in another nonprofit, or hey, let's look at, just another social justice issue. It has to go. We have to prioritize, and there are always going to be priorities in life. We have to prioritize essential services, whether it's police, big one, whether it's snow clearing, keeping the streets clean. My yard constantly has trash in it, and it's not because we don't clean it,
Just finally, Matthew, what would be your message and then your promise to Erie families out there who are listening to you?
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of it we've already gone through, but yeah, we're going to focus on, common sense things. We're going to again, focus on those essential services that you mentioned. You know, there will certainly be code enforcement as best we can for blighted properties, and I would consider that an essential service. You know, taxes are gonna come down and crime's gonna come down. And I will say this, and some people won't be happy about it, where there are individuals in the city who are committing serious crimes, okay, you know, and they are not citizens of the United States, we will work with the federal government to remove those individuals, so.
Matthew S. Thomas, Republican candidate for the mayor of Erie. Thank you so much for coming in,
Matthew,
sir.
thanks for coming by. Appreciate it very
Shake
much.
hand.
Good to see you.